In Britain, there is a story that people grow up with, told by successive governments since the 1950s, that they need not worry too much about countries that may wish to do us harm because Great Britain is part of an exclusive club. There are 195 recognized countries in the world today, but Britain belongs to that special club of 9. 9 countries that possess a weapon that makes them utterly safe from direct attack. They possess nuclear weapons. So the story reassures us that no matter the threat, the British state possesses nuclear weapons to guarantee its survival. Mess with us, and we could turn your country into a steaming, irradiated hole in the ground. This has been the justification for successive defense cuts that have reduced over the past 50 years, as my other videos on this subject have amply demonstrated, the 3 branches of the British Armed Forces to tiny shadows of their former selves. A navy with hardly any warships and almost incapable of deploying the remainder that they have to sea at short notice. An army so small it would struggle, due to ongoing worldwide commitments, to place in the field at short notice a single brigade-sized battle group of about 10,000 soldiers. And an air force full of aging planes, as well as insufficient pilots to fly them to undertake all of its many commitments. And in fact, as recent news stories highlighted, the RAF is having to return planes due to be scrapped back into service. But does all that matter when we have nuclear weapons? According to governments, apparently not. However, the story begins to make less sense if you examine the claim that Britain has nuclear weapons and a nuclear deterrent in any detail. You may be surprised to learn that Britain does indeed design and manufacture its own nuclear warheads, which is something, but doesn't actually make the missiles that will carry those warheads into action. And in fact, even the claim that Britain manufactures its own nuclear warheads has been challenged. The atomic weapons establishment at Aldermaston, for example, is not wholly British-owned. It is part managed by Lockheed Martin, the US defense company. Regarding the actual nuclear warheads, the gas reservoirs of the warheads are likely produced in the United States and are certainly filled with tritium there. The body shell, which contains the warhead, is purchased from the US, and the guidance system used by Trident is designed and made by the US firm Charles Stark Draper Laboratories. And as I said, we don't actually own the Trident missiles themselves. The missiles are in fact rented. That's right, you didn't mishear me. Britain's nuclear missiles are rented. This term, rented or leased, has been used by many newspapers and magazines to describe the situation, and I'm not making this up. Most recently, of course, the Financial Times in this article from last week. We don't own the missiles, and we don't even maintain them. The owners do that for us. And who, pray, is the owner of Britain's nuclear missiles? Why, that would be the United States. Even worse, we depend for our ultimate protection on something called continuous at-sea deterrence. One nuclear-armed Royal Navy submarine is always on patrol at any time during the year, ready, if ordered, to launch a full nuclear strike if any nation was foolish enough to try and nuke Britain. That's reassuring, isn't it? Submarines are very hard to find, unlike land-based nuclear weapons silos, so an enemy can't nobble our nukes and would face a strike from the ocean in retaliation. The only fly in the ointment is the fact that the Royal Navy is struggling to provide a continuous at-sea deterrent with its available submarines, and if we are not already vulnerable, we will very soon be so, as the old nuclear-armed boats fall to bits and require longer and longer maintenance and refit programs. I'll return to that in a moment. So let's discuss the question of missile ownership. After all, if the owner of the missiles decides not to rent them to us anymore, the status of our submarines will become academic. The Trident II D5 missile is a 100% US designed and built system constructed by Lockheed Martin. The Royal Navy operates the 4 nuclear missile submarines under the term operationally independent, which actually means operationally dependent on a foreign power for their operation, unlike the other parts of the Navy, the surface fleet and the hunter-killer submarines. Britain relies on the US to provide the missiles and to maintain them. Britain can't carry out any maintenance on the missiles themselves, as they lack the facilities. And indeed, the British missiles have to be sent every so often to a special facility in the state of Georgia in the US for such maintenance, and if test firings are required, to Florida. All we do is store and maintain the British-built nuclear warheads. Britain currently pays an annual fee of £12 million towards the cost of the US base in Georgia. This system means that unlike the United States or Russia or China, the British have to continually refer to a foreign power for permissions and authorizations and so on in the basic functionality of our nuclear deterrent. It means that Britain is completely beholden to maintain a close relationship with the US, regardless of the real relationship, political, economic or otherwise, or lose our ability to project nuclear power. Of course, commentators always point out that the special relationship is sacrosanct, and the United States would never cut off the missile's support, as that would cause a massive diplomatic crisis of the first order. But surely such a deal or relationship is very much governed by who occupies the Oval Office, rather than who sits in 10 Downing Street. How special is that relationship in reality? The missile lease, governed by a treaty between the United States and Britain, termed the 1958 Mutual Defense Agreement, which was re-ratified between the two nations last November. Agreements, however, can be broken or ignored, as history has shown us on multiple occasions. This reliance on US technology follows through from the missiles to the submarines themselves. The Vanguard-class ballistic missile submarines were designed during the Cold War and are getting very long in the tooth. There are 4 boats. The oldest, HMS Vanguard, was laid down in 1986 and commissioned in 1993, having now served for 32 years. The newest boat, HMS Vengeance, was commissioned in November 1999, 25 years ago. The planned operational life of the 4 Vanguard-class submarines was 25 years. As I make this video in 2025, all 4 boats were supposed to have been retired by now. In the world of warships and submarines, intensively using boats between 25 and 32 years old is not really a very good idea. In order to carry and launch US Trident II missiles, the boats rely heavily on a series of sophisticated and specialized US-supplied components. In other words, the British designed and built V-boats were built to operate a foreign designed and built weapons system, requiring huge amounts of foreign designed and maintained equipment being housed on board, equipment the British don't make or maintain themselves. Yes, the British Prime Minister has the ultimate say over whether permission is given to launch nuclear missiles from a V-boat. That at least is not under US control. But an over-reliance on foreign technology is dangerous in a volatile political scene, and gives a foreign power enormous leverage over foreign policy decisions of this country. What I mentioned about the Prime Minister having the ultimate authority regarding the release of nuclear weapons has also been challenged, including by the House of Commons itself. In 2006, the House of Commons Defence Select Committee concluded that, quote, "the only way that Britain is ever likely to use Trident is to give legitimacy to a US nuclear attack by participating in it," end quote. It added, quote, "in a crisis, the very existence of the UK Trident system might make it difficult for a UK Prime Minister to refuse a request by the US President to participate in an attack," end quote. This reliance on US defence equipment is not limited to the Royal Navy, but has spread throughout the British armed services, as successive governments have killed off British-designed and built products and instead bought American ones. And we will deal with both the Royal Air Force and Fleet Air Arm's reliance on US aircraft in a future video. So, 4 V-boats are supposed to be deployed thus. Each boat takes its turn to conduct a 3-month submerged patrol to provide continuous at-sea deterrence. During any 3-month period, one boat is on patrol, one is in refit or maintenance, the other 2 are training or in dock. The Vanguard class were built to replace the Resolution class ballistic missile submarines, designed to carry, wait for it, US-built UGM-27 Polaris missiles. Hilariously, the design specifications for the Vanguard class included the provision that they be armed and equipped with British-designed and built ballistic missiles, but of course that came to nothing, and instead we ended up with Trident IIs. Turning to the issue of continuous at-sea deterrent, we do know that the aging V-boats are requiring more frequent and longer refits and maintenance to stay in service. This, of course, is common sense. These are highly complex but elderly pieces of machinery. Your car goes the same way, after all. In 2023, the oldest boat in the class, HMS Vanguard, was returned to service after a refit lasting 7 years. So between 2016 and 2023, officially only 3 V-boats were doing the work of 4. That must have meant that each patrol was extended from 3 to 4 months, adding enormous strain to crews running submerged for such long periods of time. Currently, HMS Victorious, the second boat in the class, is also in long-term refit from 2023 for at least 3 to 4 years, perhaps longer. HMS Vengeance, the fourth boat, entered a long overhaul period and reactor refueling between March 2012 and February 2016. All this means that the Royal Navy only has 3 V-boats in operation at any one time, not 4 as advertised, with one always out of service in refit at any one time. We can probably also surmise that of the remaining 3, at least one must have had some kind of fault or maintenance issue during these periods that probably left only 2 operational. Or these elderly boats are in fact going to sea with serious maintenance issues or dangerous faults, simply because the continuous at-sea deterrent has to be maintained somehow. I would hazard a guess that gaps must have occurred in Britain's continuous at-sea deterrent, though I doubt the Ministry of Defence or the government would ever admit such. However, all is not bad news, for a new class of 4 ballistic missile submarines is currently under construction, the Dreadnought class. The cost for the 4 boats is over £40 billion, and the first one is supposed to enter service, well, not for some time, in fact in the early 2030s. And they will be armed with the Lockheed Trident II D5 nuclear missiles. So the V-boats will have to struggle on for another decade or more, an accident perhaps waiting to happen. Thanks for watching, please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.